Life gets ill, homie, we got bills. More than one kid, a boss we could kill. Aches and pains all hurt, we take pills. Dennis gotta use a drill with
we are back here on PodCats, the PodCats LG, the Los Gatos PodCats. Do you like our logo?
I do.
And we just got finished with first segment, the first half. And now we are visited by a student here at the Los Gatos High School. And your name is Katie. And Katie, you're a friend of my daughter's, just full disclosure. Not that has anything to do with anything really, but and I asked if we could find somebody who had some opinions about whether or not we should be opening a marijuana dispensary here in the town of Los Gatos. And you volunteered to come in and share that with us. Now, I also want to point out right now that Chris Lane from Airfield had to leave the room because he can't be in the room when somebody under the age of 21 is having a conversation about marijuana, which I find infinitely fascinating. That one of the arguments about against having a dispensary here in Los Gatos is it's going to harm the young people. And yet we can't invite you into the same room as the guy who runs the dispensary because it's basically illegal. It's against the rules. I find,
is interesting.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Shouldn't the young people have a voice in whether or not they think they're going to be harmed by this, by the dispensary opening here or not?
Well, that's why we have Katie here.
This is why we have Katie here. Katie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a junior here at Los Gatos.
Yep. And why did you volunteer to come in here today?
Well, Maya asked me to because no teachers wanted to go into the podcast and talk about it.
I asked if we could find a teacher who would come in and speak to their perspective on the youth smoking weed. I mean, we were kind of looking for all angles, right?
Yeah.
And this youth perspective is really one of the most interesting perspectives.
It is. Actually, my question on that, I think you heard us talk about how we videotaped, went around town and talked to groups of people, individuals and groups alike. And a couple of the groups with whom we spoke were young kids at the high school. And it was so interesting that we had sort of stereotyped them and thought, or profiled them, I guess, and said, oh, for sure they're going to say that they want pot dispensaries in town. And it was really interesting to me. I mean, you really can't read a book by its cover because it really was.
We somehow assumed that all young people would be in favor.
So I'm interested in your opinion on that. I mean, do you find at the high school that there's people really on both sides of this topic, do you think?
I mean, I don't know how personally people think about weed dispensaries being in town, but I can say that probably the majority of the high school population has smoked weed or ingested weed or gotten high in general. And what they use right now isn't dispensaries. What they use right now is 3 or 4 active dealers at the school who, I don't know where they get their weed from. I don't know where they get their weed from or their nicotine from or whatever else they sell. And I know that Los Gatos is known amongst teenagers as Coke Town because people have so much money in here that they can basically get any kind of drug they want.
This is another topic.
Right.
Yeah.
This is another podcast topic,
right?
Like the drug culture here at Los Gatos amongst the youth, right?
Yeah.
From what I understand.
Do you have, I'm really cutting straight to the chase here, hold on. Do you have friends that you think have a problem with smoking too much weed or ingesting or however they're getting it?
I don't have friends, but I do know people who I would say probably smoke too much weed.
So those people that you think smoke too much weed, do you think that they're doing so? Why do you think that they've come to that? Why is that their circumstance? What happened? What's going on with them?
I think a lot of them do have mental issues going on or family problems going on, and they need an output for that. So they turn to weed or to any other kind of drugs.
Alcohol?
Alcohol, sure. I think the problem really isn't prevention anymore because it's so prevalent here. I think it's more to get safe weed for these people. And I think a dispensary is a good thing because, personally, I don't buy weed from dealers because I know that weed can be contaminated with fentanyl I know that weed can be contaminated with any other kind of like hard drug available.
Right.
So right now all these people are buying weed from dealers who get their weed from who knows where. But if there was a weed dispensary that was like right here in town, it was much more available. People could get way safer weed.
So you're saying, I mean, you know, back in the day when we wanted to buy beer, you know, you'd kind of wait outside the liquor store and you'd wait for somebody to come by and like, hey, can I ask you a favor?
Yeah.
And they would go in and buy, you know, you'd give them the money, they'd go in, buy it, and they'd come out and hand it to you, right? So, yes, something like that could certainly happen here also with a
You'd
with
have
a pot
kids
dispenser.
outside the dispensary
Well, they
tapping
probably
for
would,
weed?
because of how they're regulated, you probably can have them standing right outside, but you could meet somewhere else. So it'd be, you know, but in a sense, you're saying that you think that's safer, though. Even if that happens, that's better than what's happening now.
Yeah. And I think that even if people were to use fake IDs and that they would work, it's so much more safer to get real legal weed from a dispensary than it is to get it on the streets.
Hey everybody, I want to say thank you so much for tuning into PodCats. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen or watch. I'm down here at the Hardcore Barber in Los Gatos, and just want to take a second to give a shout out to our sponsors and our supporters. First of all, I want to say thank you to KCAT for having us down, for recording the show, for helping us with all the technical stuff. KCAT has been absolutely amazing. Secondly, I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce has been a huge supporter. They've also sponsored the show, and so we want to just tell you that they're doing an amazing job. If you're not involved with the Chamber, you should be. Thirdly, I want to say thank you to Brian and Dan Real Estate. Brian and Dan, Silicon Valley Real Estate. Dan has been a huge fan of PodCats, and we're also sponsoring the show. And lastly, then, the brokerage that we work for, which is Christie's International Real Estate Sereno, formerly known as Sereno Group, has been a massive sponsor. Everybody should be using Sereno. Christie's International Sereno, the best brokerage here in Los Gatos, bar none. Thank you again for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And now we're going to get you back to the show.
Just switching on to a question. When your parents see this podcast, how are they going to feel about it?
Oh, they're not going to see it.
They're not going to see it because they just don't know how to use their iPhones?
Yeah.
Okay.
So something else you said, again, that word prevention, and that I think is what's kind of sticking with me. It's like, so why are we preventing? I mean, yes, we'd like to prevent, or we'd like to, I used to say to my kids, like, just wait. You know, just wait. You're going to, you know, your brain is still forming, you know, you're still young, you're hormonal and emotional and everything else. So that was always my pitch with them. It wasn't like I didn't want to prevent them from, in fact, sometimes I'd say, hey, maybe try this a little. You know, you have to experience these things to understand what they are, and then you have to talk to other people, and you have to watch movies about it, and, you know, hear stories from my brother or like Joanne's sister. I mean, you want to hear those stories because you want them to learn and be educated. So again, like with that prevention, you just, I guess what it was back in the day when we say like just say no, I feel like you just can't not just say no anymore. It's like, why say no? Or
I mean, I think there's all different kinds, right? We can't just lump everybody into the same basket.
What do you think, Katie, on that?
What's the question? Sorry.
Well, just the, I mean, again, just the prevention. Like, what do you think's safer for teenagers these days? Like at the high school, you know, do you have classes on? I mean, do you go into classes?
Oh God, they're not going to teach classes on weed. Or,
we had one.
Really?
In freshman year, it was health education. It was
and they
combined with
talked
sex
about drug
education.
use.
Yeah.
Oh my God, did people go bananas?
Showed us like a video of like the effects of drug use, pretty much.
I think that is powerful. So do you think that would be useful if they brought that back again? And why don't they? I mean, same reason. Why don't the teachers come on the podcast and talk about it? Like, no one talks about these things.
Because you are going to potentially run the risk of having the community come after you. I mean, that's one of the problems is I think that people are afraid that if they speak up, you become a target.
Yeah.
What are your parents' views on the dispensary? Do you know? Did you guys have this conversation?
I didn't know that there was going to be a dispensary until
today. There's not. I mean, I'm not saying there's not, but it's in the very early stages of being discussed, which is why we're having this conversation.
So
what do you think? Go ahead. No, please.
Would it be a dinner conversation now that you know?
Maybe, but I don't know how my dad would feel about it. I don't think he's like a very big fan of weed, but I don't know. Like, I really don't.
I've got my daughter off in the wings here. Did you know that I think that I would support a weed shop opening here? Do you know that?
I would have assumed that.
Yeah, I would have assumed that. But I'm just kind of a libertarian that way. I'm kind of like, let the free market be the free market, and let people make their own decisions, but let other people make their decisions about opening what they want to open, and let the market kind of work that out. If there's a place for it and there's revenue to be made, and somebody can come in and generate revenue for themselves and for the town, that's good. We've got vacancies here, and some store owners, like are having trouble making ends meet, right? It's not easy. I mean, rents are high, and it's difficult to find employees, and there's a whole slew of things that are in your way to in between you and success in retail especially. And so in a way, I think, why not? I would put it right downtown. I would just
Tell
have
us how you really feel.
I would put it right in the middle of town, because I think it would be a centerpiece. It'd be amazing. I mean, we would be trailblazing at that point.
I still have my reservations, but
Yeah,
that's why I'm on this podcast.
And I want to remind people that you're the executive director at the chamber, and you're the closest person of all of us to what is best for commerce in this town. Would you agree with that?
I think I'm pretty close, certainly, to understanding what's going on.
You're the epicenter.
And also, I think it does help, though, kind of balance it out with having children that have gone through the school system here and they're now off in college, and kind of watching their development. Having a husband who's a marathon runner who has never smoked pot a day in his life. He can still kind of claim that.
Wow.
And so it's interesting, just my, take on it, having a brother who was a serious drug addict.
Still alive?
Still alive, made it through.
I have a brother-in-law who's not.
Yeah.
Serious drug addict that didn't make it
And I question, going back to kind of what Joanne Rogers was saying about I question it because I don't really know whether or not marijuana was actually his gateway drug, or whether or not it was more mental issues that kind of...
Is it the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
I know. So, Katie, I haven't heard yet. What do you think about a dispensary here in Los Gatos?
I think it would be a good thing. Or not necessarily like a good thing, but not a bad thing either.
So you think it's net neutral. If it's here, it doesn't matter. If it's not here, it doesn't matter.
I think it's more of a good thing than a bad thing.
Yeah. You'd be in favor of.
Yes.
And not necessarily even because you want to go visit there, but just because then other people can go there and get clean product and have a safe place to go shop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One last question I had for you is, I brought it up earlier, about how, that we think as adults that we, drink a glass of wine and we really enjoy the glass of wine and we don't get high. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you're smoking a joint or taking an edible, it is for the main reason is to get high. But do you think kids view it that same way? Or do you think if you're drinking...
I think kids do usually partake in alcohol and drugs to get high. But I will say that, not to incriminate myself, but I will say that you can take an edible or you can take a hit of something and not get high at all. And it all depends on the person and the person's metabolism or the potency of the...
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I mean, like I said, if I were to have one drink, I'd be high as a kite. I really would. One drink would send me off.
It would take me about 10, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that could be a show too.
Better bang the table.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I don't know that there's that many young people that are sitting around drinking alcohol because they enjoy the taste necessarily.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're drinking to get drunk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And where do they get their alcohol?
There's alcohol dealers or...
Shut up!
Yes, there's alcohol dealers. They definitely jack their prices up way too much, but there is alcohol dealers. People get them from parents. People get them from their houses.
Parents are giving it to them, or they're stealing it from their parents?
Both.
Yeah.
I think a lot of parents' mentality is that, if you're going to do it, I might as well have you do it here in my house, and I'll give it to you safely instead of you getting it.
Well, there's a new ordinance about that, which we'll talk about one day, maybe too.
The whole Shannon Brugge thing?
Yes. So also then, do you think that parents just are cool with the alcohol because they don't want to give it up themselves? Like it's, hey, listen, I'm going to drink, you may as well drink. I mean, is it kind of like that where parents are more permissive because it's something that they want to indulge in?
I'm not sure about that. I think it's more like teenagers are going to be teenagers, and teenagers are going to do things like drugs and alcohol, and parents would rather their kids be safe about it than sneak around and, get their weed and do whatever, and get their drugs and do whatever, or their alcohol and do whatever.
Yeah, I think, Brian, in this town, most most parents really would prefer that their kids do not drink until they're 21 years old. For sure. I mean, I think you can. I mean, I don't think parents
Except
are like
that-
pushing it and saying,
Right.
"Hey, I think I want you."
But
to,
they're not willing to give up drinking in order to model that behavior for their children.
They're over 21, so there is a
Okay, we got to wrap that one up. Another day. Katie, thanks for coming in and hanging around. We had a few technical difficulties and you stuck it out, and we really
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks so
it.
much.
Thank you so much for being here.
Have a
Yeah,
good
no
rest
problem.
of your year.
We're going to take another 2-minute break and we'll come right back.
Thank you.
Boy, this is getting pretty interesting, this conversation about whether or not we should sell pot in Los Gatos, isn't it? I think that people probably want to hear more about it.
Oh, for sure.
Wouldn't you say?
There are 2 sides, 5 sides.
At least 5 sides. Move on to the next episode and hear more about whether dispensaries should be selling weed here in Los Gatos. PodCats LG.
Come together right now. Hit the ground running, ain't even a discussion. Hold up. Come together right now. Ain't no time for sleep. All we gotta do is come together.